I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Finnell. This is Tom Finnell. If he looks like a deer in the headlights, it's because he's doing engineering, a noble task. If I look like I've got a stain on my shirt, it's because there's a smudge on your TV screen. And we will just launch into our news for the week, starting with the 28th of March. From Glasgow South and Eastwood Extra, we get the news that Scotland's generated a record of 17,011 gigawatt hours of electricity in 2013, a rise of 16.4% on the previous year, according to the UK Department of Energy and Climate Change, which they call the DECC. That means about 46.5% of Scotland's energy needs come from sources such as wind or hydropower, and they've even got a solar in Scotland now, believe it or not, that far north.
I can believe it, yeah. They're playing all sorts of good things.
Yeah.
They're doing tidal.
Yep. My daughter Suzanne is studying for her PhD at the University of Glasgow, and she says that it really gets bright in the morning in the winter at about 9 o'clock, and then it starts to get dark again at 3 in the afternoon. And she says it rains all day, and so that explains the Scots' admiration for good whiskey.
That would explain it. There's stuff going on there that they're not mentioning much. It's political. I mean,
political. Wow.
A plebiscite, a vote,
yeah,
on whether to go independent.
Yes.
And this energy is a big part of the mix.
Absolutely, because if they have the energy, then they can thumb their nose at the UK. But the thing that the people in the UK are saying, on the one hand, is, well, we don't have to buy your energy. But on the other hand, if you look at the UK's energy, you
got to buy it from somebody.
You got to buy it from somebody, and most of their renewable energy is in Scotland. So if they don't buy from Scotland, their energy supply, which is supposed to be, I think, 20% renewable by 2020 or something like that, is going to wind up being about 9%. And the Scots have a goal of being 100% renewable by 2020, which they are saying they're probably going to achieve.
They're on track, I think.
Yeah, they are. Anyway, enough of that. Analysts Frost and Sullivan expect the global market for microgrids to accelerate rapidly from next year as a thirst for renewable energy driven by PVs prompts greater demand for power in off-grid locations, and we will talk about that more a good deal. That comes from echobusiness.com. This is the future. Yeah, microgrids. Yeah, and I'm going to push for microgrids in Brattleboro, at least 2 of them.
Well,
covering the whole town.
We're going to get a chance to talk about that now, but
we might whole program. I think we should. I'm putting it before the select board.
Yeah.
As a I want to create an
entity.
An entity. I want to create a committee to study how that could be done most appropriately.
You hear that, people?
Yes, absolutely. I've already had volunteers from people who are on the town meeting representatives.
I think I know some of them already, and I think they'll.
I think this would be fun, and it can't be done by the Energy Committee as much as I admire the Energy Committee, because it involves a business plan. Mm-hmm. But it can't be done by finance for a couple of reasons, one of which is that it involves energy too deeply, and the other, of course, is that the Finance Committee isn't working right now. Not enough people on it.
Probably something like a separate district, like a fire district or a solid waste district or something like that, would have to be formed.
Yeah, I think that what I'd like to see is multiple. I'd like to see every single municipality, with the exception of one, in Vermont, have its own microgrid or microgrids.
Which one is that? So
Lewis.
Lewis.
Yeah.
Somerset's in the.
Population 0. Okay.
I think Somerset's got a population of 4.
Well, maybe they could get away without it. But then on the other hand, they could just go off grid as individuals. Okay, on the 29th of March, we got this. Wind generation in the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. On Thursday, previous day, set a record for power production at one time for the second time this month. That was last month. Wind generation met 10,296 megawatts. And now this is instantaneous production, which means that this is the equivalent of about 10 nuclear power plants at that particular moment. There's no capacity factor figuring into this. This is
It's
the actual happening.
And they're using it.
They're using it. So, or nearly 29% of ERCOT's demand. ERCOT manages power for 20.
That's a company.
That's the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. Manages power for 23 million customers. So this was 29% of the demand for 23 million customers. German utility E.ON said on Friday it plans to retire its 1.3 gigawatt Grafenrheinfeld nuclear reactor in May of 2015, 7 months ahead of schedule, because of economic conditions.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not making what they need to make.
It's not making money. The world's been turned on its head as far as power is concerned, and that came from Platts. The Guardian told us the same day, climate change has already left its mark on all continents and across all oceans, damaging food crops, spreading disease, melting glaciers. According to a leaked text of a blockbuster UN climate science report due out on Monday, and it did come out on Monday, and that is what it said, and we will be hitting that more. There is a map. So Tom, do you want to explain what the map is? What's on the left?
Well, I'll just read what I've got underneath here. The Humanities Choice via the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has drawn up these maps. And the one on the left, which looks rather benign, isn't benign.
No.
That's bad.
That's how much?
That's the minimum. That's
I think
that minimizes future warming. And
Yeah.
it says that at the end of this period, which I think is the end of the 21st century, they're expecting the world climate change to go up by 2.6 degrees.
Fahrenheit. Yeah.
And the one on the right is if we don't do anything, at the same time it's going to go up by
what was it
almost
that you
9.
said about the middle of Africa? And
Oh yeah, right there where that thing is, if you look real close, there's a picture of Lucifer.
Okay.
He's going to hang out right there.
You heard it here first, folks.
I can't get it big enough so you can see it on your screen.
Now, I can tell you, I tell this to everybody over and over and over again. If you go to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources website, they have white papers on global warming that tell you what they expect for climate change in Vermont. And basically, it's bad. I mean, no maple syrup, no skiing, no fall colors, at least none from the species we've got. No brook trout, I mean, it was species after species after species. We've got about 1 million species in this world that are going to be affected by climate change at a minimum, in a profoundly negative way. And if we don't do anything about it, it's not going to be 1 million. It's going to be more like 60% of everything.
The article that those two pictures came from editorializes a little bit. I just captured.
Well, this is from the UN. This is not from some wackading-hoy.
No, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's
Right.
what the IPCC is.
Yep.
And as with every recent IPCC, this is their editorializing, as with every recent IPCC report, it is super cautious to a fault.
Yes,
And
it's
yet
super cautious,
incredibly
folks.
alarming.
It's
It
super
warns
caution.
that we're doing a bad job of dealing with the climate change we've experienced.
And you know what? If I can interject something here, I have been finding this over and over again, starting about a year ago, and I should have noticed it before. But part of this comes from Koch Industries. Part of it comes from ALEC, the opposition
They're
to
joined
doing
at the hip.
things about what?
They're joined at the hip.
Yeah, they are trying to prevent change, but every single renewable energy resource has got some special interest group that is aiming at preventing that resource from operating. And honestly, looking at those groups, I've come to the conclusion that they are, in fact, first of all, not scientific. They don't back things with facts. Second, they don't give solutions. They only give complaints.
Yeah.
So I saw one yesterday that was complaining about biomass. They don't care about what it is, how it's done, what the result is. They just want to say biomass is bad. I think they would rather have methane coming out of the landfills than having it burned in a biomass plant to produce electricity and let CO2 go into the atmosphere instead of methane, which is 20 to 40 times as bad. Opposition to wind, same kind of thing. I think these are hate organizations. I really have come to that conclusion. They are operating on people's fears, and they are projecting hate. This is not
way
good.
Of looking at it.
Not good. That's what I think it probably is. Anyway, I don't want to get off too far on that. The next day, which is the 30th of March, the Vermont Public Service Board said on Friday, which I think was the 29th, I might be mistaken, that it reluctantly approved letting the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Station operate through the end of the year. That is to say, they gave them a certificate of public good that ends at the end of this year. So that if they're in operation on January 1st, they're in violation.
I don't think that bothers them.
I don't think it would bother them, but I do think they are going to close down as scheduled. The board also approved a deal between Entergy and the Shumlin administration, and that deal has a bunch of cookies that are being fed to the state of Vermont. And I don't want to get into the argument of whether that's good or bad. It has happened. The one thing that I'm really, really interested in is making sure that the spent fuel in the spent fuel pool gets into dry casks as quickly as possible, because that's a dangerous situation. Yeah, and they have said they would do it as quickly as possible. That, by the way, came from the Barry Montpelier Times Argus, which is an organization that I go to a lot. On the same day, the 8-megawatt cogeneration plant at the Marine Corps, I love this one, at base at 29 Palms, which, Tom, you said was the size of Rhode Island?
Yep.
My gosh.
This is one base.
One base. Well, there's not a lot going on out there, you know. I mean, they occasionally go out in the countryside and see a turtle in the shade of a cactus. 29 Palms, California will be one of the linchpins of a computerized microgrid the base is developing to manage the energy as efficiently as possible, save taxpayer dollars, and operate off-grid in the case of an emergency. And folks, I got to tell you, I'm pushing for this. Any community can do this except Lewis. Okay.
I got a couple of notes on it. It's up on the screen.
Actually, you know, Lewis already does it.
Huh?
They're supplying 100% of their demand.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. Okay, you have notes on this.
That's a picture of what's up there. There's turbines back behind what you see there.
Okay.
And already, 29 Palms got solar. They've got wind. They've got turbines. They've got a couple of turbines. They're just expanding all of this.
Yeah.
And they're trying to put it all together in a connected network.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed is the parking areas are all covered with solar panels.
They don't need cars anymore.
Of course, they're in the desert, you know, so it's a good way to keep your car out of the sun.
Oh, you mean they've got the cars are parking under the solar panels?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there's an idea. As a matter of fact, last year at SolarFest, I came across a company that actually makes the mounts that you can use for that purpose at your own home. You know, you can put your own solar mounts all over your own
if you're
driveway.
in Vermont, that's helpful. But if you're in the Mojave Desert, that's mandatory.
Well, yeah, and you'd think they'd just take over the desert because, I mean, it's cheaper to mount these things close to the ground. But they're interested in keeping their cars cool, as you said. Yeah, I have no doubt of it. That came from the Desert Sun. Signs are increasingly pointed to the formation of an El Nino in the next few months, possibly a very strong one. When combined with the long-term global warming trend, a strong El Nino would mean 2015 is very likely to become the hottest year on record so far. And the slowing of global warming that people have been talking about in the last few years, which I would dispute. I don't think there has been a slowdown.
There's El Nino up there. It looks like a mouth ready to eat you.
Wow.
That's the Pacific. This is projected.
Yeah, yeah.
This is all guesswork, but it's pretty good guesswork. Pretty good science.
I think they would call it estimations.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what the Pacific Ocean is going to look like, and where it's very red, that's plus 8 degrees.
8
centigrade.
degrees, and that 8 degrees is enough to just completely change the weather patterns for the whole world, from there to Africa and back, and it changes the weather patterns in North America and South America. You know, it'd be interesting. One of the things that happened not very many years ago was that for the first time there was a hurricane in the South Atlantic. It hit Brazil. It was the only hurricane on record that hit Brazil. And I wonder what the connection with these two was. Yeah, I should look that up and see what it was.
In case you know, everybody probably knows what an El Nino is, but
I think most people do, yeah.
An El Nino is characterized by unusually warm ocean temperatures in the equatorial Pacific that contrast with the unusually cold temperatures in the equatorial Pacific during a La Nina.
Yep.
Both are associated with extreme weather around the globe.
Right.
But El Ninos are generally the hottest years on record, since the regional warming adds to the underlying global warming trend. La Nina years tend to be below the global warming trend line.
Yep.
They're expecting the El Nino to start as soon as April. We're there already.
Yep.
Peru tracks this closely, and they do for economic reasons. The El Nino threatens to batter the fish meal industry by scaring away abundant schools of cold water anchovy.
Yeah.
So they got a big economic.
They've got a lot of anchovy in Peru. If you like anchovies, go to Peru. Yeah, the whole dynamic of the ocean changes with a change of like 8 degrees in temperature, because for one thing, a lot of fish and a lot of other wildlife can't take that kind of change, you know. Another thing is that the cold water will hold a lot of oxygen. Warm water doesn't do that well. And the result of that is that a lot of fish that require oxygen, this is just an explanation of why fish won't make it in warm water. Just, they will die in water like that. So fortunately they've got other water to go to, but they can migrate to other places. And that's what they do. Okay, on the 31st of March, this came from DigiNews. Up to 24% of all coal-fired electric power plants in the United States may shut down because of EPA regulations, according to a new Today in Energy report from the U.S. Energy Information Agency. Now, I want to point out the U.S. Energy Information Agency is responsible for a lot of data, and much of it is very difficult to understand because it looks like prognostication, and in fact, it's baseline studies. But I think what they're saying here is probably correct. Mm-hmm. You know, what that's going to do is it's going to mean that we're going to have to generate more electricity from natural gas.
From something.
But natural gas is what's...
Right now, they're the leading source.
Yeah, and that means that if
that's going to run out.
The natural gas, it just means that there's more pressure on the natural gas industry, and the government is trying to ship natural gas to Europe to help the Europeans whose sources of natural gas are being threatened by the Russians. The Russians are, according to some people, blackmailing the Europeans into letting Russia take over the Ukraine, which they can do because they supply a large percentage of the natural gas going to Europe. And in fact, there was an article that I did not include in this group. The natural resources minister, I forget what the actual name is, but the environmental minister for Germany was saying, we cannot do fracking in Germany.
I read that article.
Yeah, she said, we can do a lot of things, but we can't do fracking because
Too many people.
there's too many people.
Yeah.
It's almost as badly populated as the state of Pennsylvania. So it would make sense, of course, to shut down fracking in Pennsylvania, but according to her. But she is saying we just, they can't do it. Now, on the 1st of April, actually, I skipped one here. I have to go back to the 31st of March. Energy Matters. Alteros Energy says it is set to break the world record for the highest wind turbine ever deployed. That is not tallest, it's highest. The next generation BAT, which is BAT in caps, which is an acronym for Buoyant Airborne Turbine.
It's up on the screen.
It's up on the screen. That thing on the right of the screen, and actually...
The right and the left.
Right and the left.
Same thing.
The bat is on the left and it's in flight on the left, right?
Yeah.
I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see it.
Yeah, it's a blimp.
It's a blimp. It's a little hollow blimp.
Not a very big one.
Yeah.
But I've got hopefully I've got a little video here that I can pull up.
It will be the first long-term demonstration of a thing that's cruising up in the air.
The world demands cleaner, low-cost alternatives to fossil fuels. Alteros Energies is answering that call with a high-altitude wind turbine, the BAT. For the first time, affordable wind energy can be delivered to the furthest points of the Earth, powering remote communities, off-grid industries, and disaster relief. The Alteros BAT harnesses stronger, more consistent winds found at higher altitudes. At these heights, it produces twice the energy of an ordinary wind turbine.
The reason high-altitude wind is so exciting and worth going after is really very simple. There's just a lot more of it. Winds 1,000 to 2,000 feet above the ground are on average 5 to 8 times as powerful as what you get nearer to the ground.
Reimagining proven aerospace technology, the BAT uses an inflatable helium shell to lift a lightweight turbine into the air. Power is sent to the ground using high-strength conductive tethers. The BAT also offers a unique platform to expand internet and phone services, weather monitoring, and much more. Designed to be rapidly deployed anywhere, the BAT significantly reduces human and wildlife impact when compared to ordinary wind turbines.
I think Alteros and the BAT is really exciting because it goes beyond the incremental improvements we've seen in wind and offers a breakthrough way to bring wind power to millions of new customers around the world.
Formed out of MIT, Alteros is working with the Alaska Energy Authority to launch the first commercial high-altitude wind turbine. Less expensive, more flexible, and significantly more efficient. The BAT is the next generation of wind power.
And that came from Energy Matters. On the 1st of April, Governor Shumlin signed the bill that we just talked about for net metering that almost quadruples, the amount of power that utilities can buy, are mandated to buy from renewable energy projects that come online, raising the amount to 15% of the peak load. And 15% of the peak load is a lot, because the peak load is very big compared to the average load.
Yeah. I don't know what a multiple it is, but that's your high point. All your factories are working, your air conditioners.
Yeah, absolutely. Governor Shumlin signed this bill, and we have a cookie.
Yep.
We have a prize in Windham County, and I really don't know to the extent of this, but I do know that at least the landfill, the Windham area landfill, is going to be allowed to have a bigger array than would normally be put on as a maximum size.
Well, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, this was something that Senator Galbraith sneaked in at the last minute, I think.
Yeah, I'm
good for him.
Yes, good for him.
He snuck it in there, and it's a goodie.
Yeah.
And the Windham Solid Waste Management District, which is not the town of Brattleboro, it's basically a separate municipality almost.
Well,
that's owned by 19 or so towns in the area.
Yeah.
Owns the landfill, and from what little I read about it, they would like to set up a separate entity, maybe a public-private partnership,
Right.
to generate
To
solar.
generate solar power there.
And not only can the municipalities join it, but it looks like they're going to have enough power that the general public can be part of this.
Isn't that nice?
Now, I'm going to look into this a little bit more and get myself.
I think that's
really,
yeah. If you could do that, you
really
could give a report
informed about it.
give a report to all our viewers.
I think this is
All
this
six
is
of them.
This is a winner. I mean, I forget the size of the possibility. I think it's something like 10 megawatts. It might be as much as 50. I don't know.
I doubt that it would be 50, but
That's
10,
a lot.
10 megawatts.
10's a lot.
10 is a lot.
10 is probably much more likely. But
And that 10, or whatever it is, would be coming online at precisely the time when the peak demand
plus
hits.
peak power, yes.
Which means that if we wanted to have microgrids in this area, that peak demand would be answered by, to a large extent, by the by that solar array and other solar arrays, because there are certainly others in the area, and we could have a smaller amount of power answering our power needs.
Well, the way it generally works is it's an auction.
Yeah.
And they announce how much they want to sell it for, and everybody else who's making power announces how much they want to sell it for. And theoretically, somebody's choosing, but it's really done by a machine. It's done by a computer.
And it's been done. It's totally
automatic.
constant,
It's going on.
constant.
It might be changing by the minute.
Yeah, I understand that those auctions update every hour.
Is it every hour?
But they're going on all the time because what they're doing is they're selling power for the upcoming period. So it's a constant thing that's going on.
So if they're the cheapest power,
they're going to come online.
and they're going to be a lot cheaper than that gas turbine down in Massachusetts that's coming on.
Yeah.
You know, the peaking plants.
Well, peaking plants are among the most expensive power
Absolutely.
sources we've got.
Absolutely.
People think of natural gas as being cheap, and it is cheap if you've got a plant that's designed like a nuclear plant, that it has to run like a nuclear plant and flat out all the time. But these peaking power plants are among the most expensive we've got. They're similarly expensive to offshore wind, although I think offshore wind power is going down so fast that it's probably well below peaking power plants now.
Much already.
It is? Okay.
Offshore wind is getting close to baseline prices.
Is it? I suppose it must be. They're building so much of it in Europe. They'd have a lot of experience with it.
We don't have much offshore power here yet.
Not yet.
But they're looking at it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Every state who's got oceanfront,
Yeah.
from Texas to Maine,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yep.
sure California as well,
Yep.
is looking at it.
And for good reasons. The Massachusetts Audubon Society, folks, is in support of Cape Wind. And the reason is because it saves the lives of birds. And why does it save the life of birds? Well, because fossil fuel power from coal and natural gas kills about 35 birds for every bird that's killed by wind per unit of energy. So if we were to switch entirely from fossil fuels to wind nationally, we would save the lives of 95% of the birds that are being killed by fossil fuel plants, which is a lot of birds. But it's not as many as are being killed. There was, Benjamin Sovacool did a thing, and he talked about where this came from, and he talked about Crystal River in Florida. There are there's 5 stations there. 1 is nuclear, that's been shut down, and there are 4 that are coal, and they all have cooling towers, which those big things that come up.
Yeah.
People recognize as being associated with nuclear, but in fact they're associated with any kind of
anything needs cooling.
Anything that needs cooling, which includes the baseline natural gas plants and the coal plants and the nuclear plants. And on 2 successive nights, they went around all of the cooling towers and counted the dead birds that had hit the cooling towers during the night.
Just flying into it.
Just flying into it. And they found over 3,000 birds. I've forgotten how many the actual number was. It was something like 3,500 birds from 2 nights. And that is a number which is probably 20% of the number that the Canadian government gives for the number of birds killed in an entire year by all wind turbines in Canada.
You better say that one again.
Okay,
It went over my
the
head.
number of birds killed in 2 nights at Crystal River, Florida, was about 20% of the total number of birds killed by all wind turbines in Canada in a year.
Wow.
These big
Yeah,
cooling
you don't think
towers.
about it.
You know, I think what might have happened, and it might have been that they just checked those on a day when there were a lot of migrating birds. But those big cooling towers are sitting there. They go up about 10 or 12 stories.
They're dark.
They're dark. They're uniform, and the birds that are flying are birds like geese and stuff like that. I'm just guessing. Are navigating by looking at the moon and saying, "There it is, there it is," and they are not paying attention to what's directly in front of them because they know that they're hundreds of feet above the they don't expect it. So they just go bang into those things, and but fossil fuels kill birds by poisoning them as well, and it's all a very sad thing. Anyway, you've got an idea of how I feel about it. I'm sure that there's people out there who are going to complain that I'm being unjustly supportive of wind. But if that's the case, give me a study that shows that birds are being killed. I'd like to have something other than an anecdote. The state of New Jersey is trying to flesh out details of a proposed $200 million energy resiliency bank that would...
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, that would dole out federal funds to projects aimed at curtailing outages during extreme weather. That comes from New Jersey
So
Spotlight.
the money's coming from the feds.
Yeah, for resiliency.
This, I'm sure, has something to do with hurricanes.
Oh, you know, and the fact of the matter is, this could be from the DOE, but it could be from somebody else as well, because you know, Homeland Security has got reasons to keep the power on.
Oh, sure.
Guys.
Absolutely. No,
Okay.
This is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it is. And we should take advantage of that too. Let's be resilient. Let's have every community in Vermont figure out how it is going to be resilient as a community, except Lewis. They don't have to figure it out. They're already there. This, on the 2nd of April, once we've got past April Fool's Day, and by the way, neither of those things was April Fool's. In the wake of Hurricane Sandy, states in the Northeast are putting the weight of government policy and budgets behind microgrids. Okay, they're learning from the Marines, I guess.
It's not the first time we've used that word in this program. It's the future.
Yeah, I believe it is. Self-sustaining islands of electric power to keep critical services running in the midst of broader grid blackouts. Now, a microgrid, the way they're defining it, could be a hospital where all the lights stay on when the grid goes down.
Which most hospitals do right now.
Right, except in this case, they're designed to go on for a more extended period of time than the batteries will support. And also, microgrids, and we heard this earlier from the discussion of the Marine base at 29 Palms, and we will hit again. The microgrids could be community. They could be a county. They could be a neighborhood. They could be a cluster of houses. They could be anything. It's like being off-grid, except that you're not off-grid. You can make money doing this as a community. You could make money making your own electricity, selling it to your own people, and sell it as an individual. You could do it, exactly. And these are things that, by the way, Green Mountain Power will actually help if you're nice. Or so I'm told.
What I see happening is these small microgrids, like the hospital you mentioned, will interconnect with other small microgrids, which will in turn interconnect with larger microgrids, which will eventually interconnect with the overall grid.
Yes.
And you're going to see something like a succession
but
of
you know,
interconnected grids that can stand alone or help each other as this situation requires.
Right. And we've actually already had one of these in Brattleboro for a long time, which is the generating facility at the Brattleboro Retreat.
Yes.
They have three.
And it still works.
Yeah, they have 3 diesel generating gensets down there, and each one is about 1/4 of a megawatt. So they can do 3/4 of a megawatt, and that's an interesting story in itself. How that came about. But they're running on diesel. They don't have to be non-renewable though. They could run on corn oil.
Yeah.
I mean corn syrup.
Corn-
I mean vegetable syrup.
Vegetable oil. Well,
Vegetable
corn
oil. Yeah, I suppose it is. Okay.
Oh, I'll just mention something about that. When I was selling energy efficient lighting
Yes.
to industry and stuff like that, I talked to the retreat,
Oh.
and they weren't interested. And the
Okay.
reason they weren't interested was the price of power they were paying was so low that the math didn't work.
Oh, of course.
You couldn't save enough money to justify the payment because they were buying the power so cheap.
Yeah.
And the reason why they were buying the power so cheap was an arrangement with Public Service Electric and Gas. No, wrong company. CVPS.
CVPS.
To be a standby generator for them.
Yes. This is a very cute thing. Previously, they had been after CVPS to reduce their power prices because they were buying so much power, and they thought it was unfair that they would buy as a large user at the same rate as a household.
Well, I can see why they might think that.
But CVPS was unwilling to change their prices. So they went to CVPS one year and they said, if you don't give us a better price, we're going to be generating our own power and we're going to tell you to go away. And CVPS said, right. And the next year, CVPS noticed that they weren't selling power to that organization anymore.
Isn't that interesting?
And
I
they
didn't
had,
hear that side. He
yeah,
didn't
this
tell me
is
that.
what I got from a lecture that was given by the guy who was running the arrangement over there. And he said, they came and they said, we need you back. And the people at the Brattleboro Retreat and CVPS made a deal. And the deal was the Brattleboro Retreat was able to generate its own power at 7.9 cents per kilowatt hour. CVPS agreed to sell them power at 6.9 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
I'm sorry. They could generate it at 6.9. CVPS agreed to sell it to them at 7.9.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound like a reason to take CVPS's offer until you realize you get to the point that your 1/4 megawatt generator is not able to do enough. You've got a choice of buying a little bit of power from CVPS or starting up another generator. Mm-hmm. So it can be cheaper to buy that power, even though the averages don't sound like they work out. But they made that deal, and the deal was based on one thing that the Brattleboro Retreat had to promise, and that was at a moment's notice they would bring those power generators up, cut themselves off from the grid, or alternatively be putting power onto the grid.
Well, it sounds like a good idea, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It made them a very valuable customer because they were a resource of power in addition to being just a resource of income.
By the way, on an unrelated item but connected to Brattleboro.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the on-site journalism site, the local journalism site Brattleboro?
Oh, yes, of course.
Chris Grotke, who runs that, has been running a history of Brattleboro.
Oh, yeah.
A little sideline. And he mentioned last week, he took a clipping from an old newspaper, like 1905.
Yeah.
And it was saying that the Brattleboro Street Railway Company, which was the trolley car line, saved money this week because they ran on hydropower instead of buying it.
Oh, my gosh.
They apparently had their own little hydro generator somewhere
Which
in
was
town.
probably at the Whetstone Brook.
Yeah, it had been.
Yeah.
We're talking 1905.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Way back then, and they were talking about how much money they saved.
By the way, James Perkins is going to be coming down here in 2 weeks. He tells me, and he's got a presentation to make on hydropower, which I think will include a proposal for the Whetstone Brook.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I am
He's got
really
some good
interested.
ideas.
Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing that. That'll be 2 weeks from now. Yeah, my great-grandfather was the first person in Plattsmouth, Nebraska to have his home set up with electricity.
That's cool.
Isn't it?
Nebraska?
Plattsmouth.
Good. I never heard of it.
He had a guy who worked for him, I think he was the gardener or something, who was given the job of maintaining the battery. I'm not kidding. If you think that's a good one, try this out for size. My great-grandfather was the first person in Plattsmouth, Nebraska to have a telephone. Okay, by 17 years. It was 17 years before the second person came up with a telephone. Now, figure out where that goes. Who did he talk to?
It was only 18 people in the town.
No, it was bigger than that. Anyway, I'm told that there were three phone calls in 17 years, one to St. Louis and two to New York. Let's see now, I've got off track here. We were talking about...
You're on 4.2.
I'm on 4.2. That was the one about microgrids.
Yeah.
And now we're to Northern Ireland's biggest power generator plans to build a huge battery facility that can store energy produced by wind farms. AES, owner of Kilroot and Ballyumford power stations, plans to build the 100 megawatt facility at Kilroot. 100 megawatt battery.
Batteries.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't be able to fit that into my flashlight. You know?
I don't think so.
That's a big battery.
A huge battery facility, they described it.
Yeah.
It is.
That's got to be
I did see a
big.
picture of that. I didn't take it down because it wasn't all that interesting.
I'd be really interested in knowing what the technology is.
Yeah. I
actually didn't read this article. I suppose it might be in the article. It came from BBC News. My bet is that it's lead acid, because lead acid is still fairly cheap compared to other resources. And by the way, I've been writing an article for Green Energy Times on Ray batteries in Connecticut.
Uh-huh.
They have batteries that they will sell you for a home system, off-grid system or whatnot, that have plates that are over 1/4 of an inch thick.
Wow, they last a long time.
These batteries are warranted for 7 years. He has batteries in the field that have lasted 30 years, and
They lead acid or what?
lead acid, yeah. And this is an upgrade to the batteries that have lasted 30 years. And I have to give a disclosure on that. The batteries that lasted 30 years are in Cuba, so they're very, very well taken care of. Because the Cubans have got no resources, so they can't just afford to replace batteries every 7 years. So they take care of them. But yeah, okay. West Lindsay District Council has granted planning permission for a 50 megawatt solar park on the site of a former RAF base in Lincolnshire. When completed, the project is anticipated to share the title of the largest solar farm development in the UK. 50 megawatts.
That's a big farm.
In the UK.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this
There's
is...
not much land in the UK.
Well, not only is there not much land in the UK, but the UK is really far north of Vermont. Very far north of Vermont.
That's true, too. Yeah, I didn't even think of that aspect.
Most of the UK is north of most of Germany, and all of Germany is farther north than any part of Vermont. Yep. So, you know, we're back to the 6 hours of sunshine in the winter kind of thing. Only it isn't six hours of sunshine. I lived in the UK very briefly, and when I was there at summer solstice, I think we had 6 hours. Actually, it was 6 hours. It was 6 hours of night at the solstice.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
9 to 3.
Yeah.
The sun went down at 9 and came up at 3.
Wow.
And I had jet lag. I mean, I was, zonked. Okay.
When I was in college, I went on a Navy cruise to Norway.
Okay.
And at midnight, you could read a newspaper. The sun wasn't out, but it was twilight.
Yeah.
But it was bright enough to read a newspaper. And then it got light again.
And then it got light. You were able to read the newspaper, and then it got light. That's good. Yeah.
It was June, but
yeah. Well, at that latitude in December, it would have been a slightly different thing.
I'm sure.
Okay. West Lindsay District Council. I just read that. The 3rd of April. That's today.
Yep.
The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has issued its second of 4 planned reports. This is a report we were talking about. This has actually come out, and the leak report was not a lie. It said exactly what they said it was. It said that every ocean, every continent has been affected, and we are in trouble. Now, I will tell you, I honestly believe that 100 years from now, people will be very likely happier and healthier than they are today, right where we're living. But we got to get our act together.
It's going to be very different.
It's going to be different. But I think
it's going to survive.
But I think it's going to go past survival. I think we're going to have to face some challenges. We're going to have to deal with them. And when we deal with those challenges, we're going to come out at the other side with an ability to deal with each other that will be much enhanced.
I think so. I think it pretty much has to happen.
Yeah. Second, and that, by the way, came from the Energy Collective. This from Clean Technica, American-made wind power has long enjoyed popular support across the country. Now there's evidence to suggest that the more wind power there is in a state, the more the people like it. I did a very brief story for Green Energy Times that was about a town in Kansas called Greensburg. Did I mention this last time? They have a wind farm.
Yeah, you did.
Of 10 turbines 3 miles out of town.
Yeah.
Those people love wind. Nobody has complained about it. Everybody in town is within 1.5 miles of at least 14 turbines. I mean, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And they love it. They say they're very proud of this. Greensburg, Kansas is 100% wind 100% of the time. And they do that by having lots of turbines in different places. But, yeah, the thing about intermittent power, Tom, intermittent power is intermittent when you've got one wind turbine.
Okay.
Okay, the wind is intermittent when you've got one turbine. There's a magic thing that you can apply to that situation that gives you power 100% of the time. And it's something that has already been known, and that's called a transmission line.
Duh.
Duh. Yeah. Wow. There is a wind farm in Nebraska, I think, or Kansas. It's one of those two states. I think it's in Nebraska, that is supplying power to a utility in Alabama. And this is a lot of power these people are supplying to this utility in Alabama.
Are they directly connected, or is it a
I
bookkeeping thing?
think they're second cousins. And I think they're actually, I don't know that it's direct. My guess is that it's probably going from one grid to the next, and that grid is going to the next.
Thing.
I think it's more a bookkeeping thing.
But this just was announced within the last month. Some outfit in Wyoming is building a huge wind farm.
Yes.
To feed into Southern California.
Yes.
And they're actually running a transmission line.
That's right. They are, and this is huge.
Yeah.
This is really, really big. And they will save California, they say, $1 billion a year in electric bills.
That ain't hey. Nothing to sneeze at.
It's more than I could spend in an entire week.
For them to be able to justify, an 800-mile long transmission line, 1,000-mile long, the economics has to be there.
Yeah, they're going from Wyoming to Southern California.
Yeah.
This is not the shortest route to California. This is a route to Southern California. And they do have the advantage that they're going through a lot of land that has very low value. Mm-hmm. But the wind farm in Wyoming is going to be gigantic. And personally, I think it'll probably do almost no environmental damage compared to fracking. And the final thing that we have on today in the news, this came in today, and you didn't get it. You would have if you saw today's news. But in the weekly thing that I sent yesterday, it's not there. Rates from the Hawaii Electric Light Company are consistently above 37 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, I did read that, but I didn't have any pictures to take down.
I can understand that. Despite nearly half the power coming from renewables. The reason why this is so expensive is because it's based on oil being brought in to the islands, or coal to Hawaii.
They don't have oil, they don't have coal.
They've got to import all their power sources. The renewable stuff, the fuel is free, and it's on Hawaii. So these people are very upset about the fact that they're not getting lower costs for their power. Nevertheless, Parker Ranch, and Parker Ranch is a cattle ranch which is run as a charitable trust.
Oh yeah,
I don't know
how that, but it wasn't very meaningful.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been. It was created. It has created a subsidiary. This is a subsidiary of a ranch, which is selling power through a microgrid. It's using power on the ranch, and it's also selling it to neighbors as a microgrid. Here again, we're talking about a microgrid. This ranch is huge, and they have decided that it would be cheaper to generate their own power from their own renewable resources, and then whatever they don't, in excess they've got, they're going to put into to give to their neighbors. They're probably going to be grid tied. It would make sense to have it grid tied so they can sell to the grid. But if they can't do it, that's fine. They don't have to sell it to the grid. They can, if they have excess power, they can use it to boil water or generate hydrogen or something.
Something like that. There's ways to save it now.
There are ways to save it, and as a matter of fact, on Hawaii, they might be able to put up pumped storage.
Well, there's mountains.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we have got a little bit of time left. What do you got to show us?
I got a couple of pictures here. I'll pull this one up.
Oh, yes, I love this one.
This is that 8-megawatt turbine. That's the nacelle. That's the main power generator.
Yeah.
That goes way the heck up on that pole.
Way the heck.
And if you're looking, there's a little guy right down here.
That is not wee folk guy, by the way. That is absolutely.
He's about 6 feet tall or something close.
Something close to that.
So this thing here is about as big as some of those log trucks that go down to Sasamos.
Yeah. And you had said earlier you thought that the shape of it might have been dictated by the largest object you could put on a road.
That the size of this has been determined by what they can reasonably get over the highway.
Yeah. So although, you know what? These things they're manufactured in Denmark.
These are mostly offshore, so they could float them out to sea.
They can float them out to sea. That thing could leave Denmark, and where it's manufactured, and never go on land again. Mm-hmm. So
But looking at that one, like I said, it's about as big as a large over-the-road truck, maybe even a little bit larger.
Yeah.
And that's 8 megawatts.
8 megawatts.
And I'm sure as we're speaking here, there's people trying to figure out how to make a 10.
Oh, are you kidding? They're probably trying to figure out how to make a 20.
But there's got to be a limit.
Well, one of the limits for these things is the price of neodymium.
Yeah.
Because the magnets that they're using are neodymium magnets.
So they're stronger magnets using an exotic earth metal.
Right, and if for folks who have not had any connection with neodymium, you do hear about neodymium magnets from time to time. Neodymium is not something that you. The fact of the matter is, you've got these elements around, but it's very.
Know what to do with them.
Yeah, they were called rare earths, and nobody really understood what they were at all until the second half of the 19th century. And then they started to separate them, and they figured out that there was more than one element involved in this, and I've forgotten how many there are, but there's a bunch of them: dysprosium and neodymium and protactinium and gadolinium and europium.
Unobtainium.
Huh?
Unobtainium.
Unobtainium. That's one of them also. I used to work in the chemical industry, and I worked with a lot of gadolinium, and most people I've known who are chemists had never seen a gadolinium compound.
I'm one of them.
These are special things. They're very unusual. What else have you got?
Well, we were talking about that blimp before.
Yeah.
And there's another blimp.
Oh, yes.
The autonomous solar-assisted airship.
Which is on the right-hand side of the screen.
It's kind of a floating satellite.
Yeah. And these things, you can get a camera on one of those things that it will give you much better resolution than something that's in high orbit. These things are actually in the atmosphere.
Right now?
Yeah.
Real?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And they're like 12 miles up. So they can probably do photographs of things like license plate
Well, I
numbers
bet
if
you
they
they can.
felt
What they're
like it.
talking about here is border and maritime surveillance, boosting mobile network capacity, extending internet coverage, and enhancing GPS.
Right.
And it's able to maintain a stationary position. This isn't tethered.
Yeah.
It's just up there, controlled electronically.
And the stuff that you see that looks like windows on that,
Those solar panels.
those are solar panels, and that's what powers it.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
says
got
here, the craft will consume a substantial amount of power in order to stay in a stationary position in an environment where the winds reach around 90 kilometers an hour. Wow.
I'm surprised they're that low, to tell you the truth.
Its creators state it will be able to undertake missions a year in duration with an average service lifespan of about 5 years.
Interesting.
Now, this is also an interesting statement. While the potential for atmospheric autonomous satellites is exciting, it also raises some concerns about privacy.
Yes.
These vehicles will be able to take higher resolution images than traditional satellites.
Yes.
And they can read license plates.
Yes, and they can, yeah. They could I mean, we're talking 12 miles. An ordinary camera is not going to be able to do it to identify the face of a person, but
I love Big Brother.
the equipment of that type, I would think, could be problematical.
This is an interesting
Another reason not to go swimming nude in your swimming pool, or to go swimming nude in your swimming pool, depending upon your attitude.
in your body. There's another interesting couple of pictures here.
Not mine. My body wouldn't qualify for that kind of work. Well, maybe it would.
This is the Bay of Fundy.
Yes, there you go.
High tide and low tide.
High tide and low tide. And that, by the way, is in an area where the Bay of Fundy, well, you don't even see how low the tide is, ultimately, because you can't even see, is the water level visible, or is that just mud in the background on the low tide one?
On low tide, it's rocks. I mean, there's a boat sitting there on the ground.
Yeah, but behind the rocks, it looks...
That's a river.
That's a river.
Or a bay or something like
Yeah,
that. So
I'm just wondering whether that's actually
just
water.
about the end of that pier is the end of this dry land.
Yeah.
And then there's some kind of body of water behind it.
Okay, so this difference is actually rather small for the Bay of Fundy.
There's bigger places than
There's
that.
places where it's much
let's
bigger.
take a look at the Bay of Fundy. I've got it here.
And you had told me something I never knew about waves.
There is the Bay of Fundy on the right, and on the left is a
Bigger Bay of Fundy.
bigger form, so you can see it relation. It's got the geographical designation. This is New Brunswick. Right here is Maine. So a little bit of Maine is in the Bay of Fundy, and already they're working on some experimental projects in Maine.
Yes.
And they're definitely working on some of the projects in the Bay of Fundy for tidal power. I think it's the highest tidal power in the world.
That's what I've been told. The Severn estuary is similar, and it's actually even similarly shaped, but it's not as big. Bay of Fundy has got huge tides. There's a lot of power going in and out of there. I have no idea how much power would be generated from that, but I would think that it would be a substantial amount.
Well, the potential is enormous.
The potential is enormous, yeah.
That's a big place.
I mean, if you think about it, the potential for power is enormous. We've got, I've forgotten which government agency said this, but the United States has enough potential for offshore wind to supply all of our power needs for electrical power. That's just offshore wind. And you know, we've got huge quantities of power available. You know, Tom, we're getting up on the end of the hour, and I think it would be a good point to break off. I have to go work because we've got a deadline at Green Energy Times. So I'm going to say goodbye. Tom is going to say goodbye. You saw his hand go by, I think. There you go.
There it is. There
Yeah,
it
why
is.
don't you switch that to you so that people can see your face? There we go. Tom Finnell.
Hey, there
Hey.
you go. Which camera's looking at me? Oh,
I think
There
it's,
it is.
Is it this one?
no, it's this one. No,
It's
it's that one.
See you later, folks. Have fun. Have a good week. We'll be back next week. We're not continuing this for the internet the way that we usually do, but we'll be here next week to tell you everything about everything that has to do with energy.